fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. All my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click that subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Jack Bennett boards the mothership. He's the director and executive producer of Never Surrender, a Galaxy Quest documentary. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Bennett. Thanks so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Totally mine. So I always start off with the question of inspiration. So what inspired your love of film and who your earliest influences?
Oh, man. All right. Well, I went to high school and college in the 90s, so I'm very much of that era. But that was the thing about the 90s is that there was a huge 70s resurgence. Like all the 90s film geeks were, talking about Scorsese and Robert Altman, and that was the point of reference. So I remember even being a little kid, I think there was some aspect of me watching a movie. My parents were like, oh, good, he's safe. He's in the basement, he's watching a movie, he's safe, he's fine. And that meant that for a lot of my childhood, I was having my most emotionally intense reactions in my life to things happening in movies. So I was getting like emotionally affected by simulated drama and all that kind of stuff more than I was like, the world around me. So I just have a lot of memories of just having really intense. I remember watching Cocoon when I was a kid and just crying buckets, all that kind of stuff. But my parents like to do things like go to dinner parties and just park my younger brother and I on the couch, order us a couple of pizzas and be like, and you can watch whatever you want. And we got to a certain age, probably way too young, where the stuff we were watching was like The Road Warrior and The Terminator and The Thing and all these sort of early 80s Aliens. We saw Aliens before we saw Alien for some reason. And there was all of this nihilistic genre stuff. Like that was like a big part of it. And I go back and watch those movies and realize like, wow, I was into grunge 10 years before I was into grunge. So it's like, life is pain, and also there are killer robots. But that was like the early influence. And then one of the things that I always look at when I look at those movies from the 80s, that's the confluence of special effects were king, and of course they're all practical effects, but in a way that they hadn't been in any decade prior. It was like special effects were king at the same time as this sort of post Jaws, post Star Wars idea of the blockbuster, which is spectacle. Movies are spectacle. But then there was all this leftover 70s character study kind of stuff and ambiguity, moral ambiguity. And then also all of this sort of post actors studio, tremendous acting and people who are creating real characters instead of, you would get criticized if you were an actor for sleepwalking through a role. So I always go back to a movie like Fright Night, where not only is that one of the great special effects movies of that era, but Chris Sarandon and Roddy McDowall and everybody, Amanda Beers is terrific in that movie. Like everybody's creating a whole character out of their part, even the aspects of it that in any other movie would be perfunctory. So I think I really, as a genre fan, came up in a really good time to have even genre films be pure cinema and full cinema and the possibilities of cinema. But then, I hit high school and everything. I was watching Dog Day Afternoon and I was watching Goodfellas. It's a 90s movie, but it still connects to Scorsese and, Taxi Driver and all that stuff. By the time I was 14, I'd seen Taxi Driver, but I hadn't seen, Top Gun. So there we go. Early influences. So yeah, I think maybe it was a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was a movie like that. Just to be 12, 13, 14 years old and watching a movie like that and being so completely rocked by it. Like that was what really piqued my curiosity. And that way that a filmmaker like Milos Forman can blend reality with stage drama and hire non-actors and stick them in with the actors. And, the way an actor like Jack Nicholson can make the non-actors seem like actors, and make everyone around him better. And it's Dog Day Afternoon's like that too. Those are two of my favorite movies. And then to have the genre aspect of that too, like to have it all kind of blend together. Like movies were this, even today when I watch them, if they're working, I'll forget that there's a crew and the magic works. It's a fantastic way to be.
I absolutely love movies, and I love the ones that you mentioned. I will say I think the practical effects were the best always. When you look at some of the
Yeah.
'80s by practical effects, I'm like, we totally missed that in today's movies.
Well, now you can do anything, so it's not impressive when you do stuff.
Right.
But then what becomes impressive is the audacity behind it. Like this, if it's a shocking storytelling, or I thought that the story was going to go this way and it went that way, or
Mm.
even, geez, how'd they come up with that? It's like that more than how'd they do that. They can do anything. But I will tell you, just as a giant horror fan, I remember the last time I was watching a horror movie. This might be the last horror movie in my adult life that really freaked me out. Like some of them have here and there, but the last time I remember being as scared at a horror movie as I was when I was 10 years old was the Spanish movie Rec with the brackets,
No,
REC.
I don't
It
know
was
that one.
it was remade as Quarantine.
Okay.
And but the original movie, so it's like 80 minutes, 85 minutes of a really cool zombie, actually infected human, but zombie horror flick with like great action. And it's maybe the best found footage horror movie ever made, because the whole premise is that a news crew is stuck on the site. So we're watching their footage,
Mm.
and it's well shot because it's a professional cameraman
Right,
and
right,
it's
right.
news. So it's not like, found footage like this. It's for those of you who are only listening to the audio, I was shaking my hands over there. But but also, so that movie is like, that's a really cool genre movie, and it has all these thrilling set pieces, and it's just a really good movie. And then it starts to look like it's going to explain too much and shit the bed at the end. And then the last 10 minutes of the movie are just an abject nightmare.
Mm.
And there's a moment in the movie, and the actor, I think it's the guy who plays Dracula in Voyage of the Demeter. I think it's that Spanish
Mm.
actor. He appears in the doorway as a silhouette, and I'm looking at something that's physically impossible, and my brain is telling me that's not CGI. That's a real thing. You're looking at a real thing with weight and dimension that's moving through this frame, and
Mm.
it steps into the light. And anybody who's seen this movie knows what I'm talking about. My brain broke. And it's not even how did they do that? It's more like, what is that? It's so that was, I mean, that was over a decade ago at this point, but it is nice to know that there is the possibility you can still watch a movie and go, oh my God, what is that? Oh, what is that? What the hell? And we all become Jack Burton. Okay.
well, you mentioned Aliens, you mentioned Terminator, and if
Yeah.
you want, I can remember we talked a little bit off camera about a Lance Henriksen story that you had,
Oh
and,
yeah.
I'm going to make you dive into that one.
Oh, okay. Well, Lance is one of my, I've met a lot of great people, and it's been, they say don't meet your heroes, except I keep meeting my heroes and having a great experience. So I don't know. It's still the clock is still ticking on me to meet a hero who's a real piece of shit. But anyway, the people that I've met, Lance I met because I was at Rock and Shock one year and I was actually moderating panels. So I moderated a panel and Lance was touring. I think he was touring with Not Bad for a Human, his autobiography. And so he's signing books, and they had a panel that was scheduled with him and Jenny Wright from Near Dark.
Mm.
And it was going to be a panel talking about Near Dark. And he's got a line out the door, and he's just, he's signing, and he's like charging for every book that he signs. And he's just, gotta be nice to the fans, gotta sign the books, gotta do they want my book. So I finally have to go up to Lance and say, hey, we got a panel scheduled with you. And he's like, no? Oh, okay. All right. Hey, sorry, everybody. I'll be back in. He looks at me. I'm like, 45 minutes. He's like, I'll be back in an hour. So we walk away from his, he's like, oh, sorry, man. I'm just getting such a great reaction. It's great. And we walk through a little side door to come to the area where the panel is. And there's 10 people in the audience.
Oh no.
And they're just sort of strewn out, like a lot of people all over the place. And Jenny's standing there, or I think I brought them both out at the same time. So I'm supposed to moderate this panel, and we come out, and Lance sees all the people spread out, and he goes, oh my God. All right, come in. Everybody come here. Everybody come here. Everybody in the audience is looking at each other. He's like, come on. I'm not gonna do this. And he points to the stage where the mics are set up. And he goes around to the front of the stage and he grabs a chair for Jenny. He's like, here, Jenny, you sit here. I'm gonna sit on the stage. It's I got a wooden ass. And he sits on the edge of the stage, and everybody comes up. He's like, no, 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 closer, closer. So everyone pulls their chairs up, and we have campfire story time with Lance.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
he just tells all these, like, his first reaction is, I'm losing all the money from selling my books to this. And then he's like, no, no, you people showed up. You want to talk. And we had a great time. And I got to ask him, I've noticed this about character actors in particular, genre character actors, said, yeah, they love that you love their movies. Like Lance loves that you love him from Near Dark and Aliens and Millennium. But I mentioned the fact that he played Abraham Lincoln, in a TV movie with him. Rob Morrow played John Wilkes Booth. So I mentioned that, and he kind of looked at me like, "Oh, good," like that. Where they always love. I talked to Tobin Bell once in a panel where everybody just wanted to hear about Saw, and the first thing I said was, I watch Goodfellas every year, and every year I hear your voice, and then remember a second later, oh yeah, that's right. Jigsaw opens the door for Robert De Niro in that one shot in Goodfellas. And he starts laughing. And then we talk about The Firm. We talk about Mississippi Burning. We get to talking about the Saw movies through him being like a working actor. And then by the time he's at the thing that he always gets asked about, he's like opening up about that, because now it's not about, oh yeah, you guys only know me from that movie. It's about, and then I got my starring role. I got my Freddy Krueger. I got my stamp on pop culture. So I've found that that's a really good, this is, you already know this, but for those of you in the audience who are going to interview, do your homework. They really appreciate it.
Well, can we talk about Land? Have you ever seen The Artifice Girl?
Oh, that's the one that he was talking about on your podcast? No, I haven't seen that.
That is really good. It's one of those movies where, because sometimes I ask people to do interviews, other times someone asks me to do an interview for somebody. A publicist is like, hey, I need you to talk to so and so. Not in a 10%. This was something totally different. And when I saw the movie at the beginning, I was like, all right, what the hell? I mean, I got 2 hours to kill. I'll just watch the damn movie. But then as I was watching, I was like it takes you a little while to like get into it, because it's kind of a slow burn conversation. Mostly it's 100% conversation almost. And you're
I love a slow burn.
Yeah, and you're just like, all right. And then you start paying attention to it a little bit more, and you're like, holy shit, this is absolutely goddamn fascinating. And then like I said, then because it's one of those movies that you know the type of movie where you don't know any of the actors but one.
Right.
And they pay that actor just to put his name to the movie to get people to buy it.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, it's gonna be one of those things. But when you get to the end, especially when you get to where Lance Henriksen shows up with the girl, you're like, holy shit, this movie is so effing good. It's so good.
I gotta check it out.
It has no right to be that good the way, because it's so simple, so low budget. But you're thinking to yourself, by the end, your brain is still thinking about the movie hours later.
Yeah, and that's the best thing that a movie can do for you, right? Because if they're done well, they're immortal. And so many movies almost seem like they're aiming for disposable.
Right.
And you're like, no, give me a movie that I'm going to want to buy the special edition of in 25 years. Lance is such a good actor, but that thing you were describing about the unknowns, like that's kind of my favorite thing about the movies. That's the magic trick that the movies really, really pulls on a regular basis when they're done well, is you meet somebody you've never seen before, and 2 hours later you love them.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes that's an unknown who becomes a movie star, or sometimes that's just a character that, like, by the end of the movie, you're like, I want to see 20,000 more entries in the series starring that character. That feeling of discovery gets so exciting when you feel like you're in on a secret, where you're like, I just saw something and nobody's going to know what this movie is, but everybody's got to see it. And right. I love that. I love also really smart casting like that, where if you cast somebody that the audience has familiarity and baggage with, then what that character does kind of it's either fulfilling those expectations or subverting those expectations. Yeah. And I always love a movie where you see somebody who's like you're very familiar with and they're unrecognizable, like Uncut Gems. Yeah. Halfway through the movie you've stopped watching Adam Sandler and just watching that guy. But when that's also an unknown and you have no baggage at all, if you've never seen a person before, then all you know about this person is what you've seen in the movie.
Right.
That's your only baggage. Like, there's something beautiful about that. Lance
go
shows
ahead.
up
Sorry.
even Lance's paycheck movies he shows up for though.
Yeah.
He's a really good actor, and then he'll do the genre stuff where you know why they hired him. And then when Viggo Mortensen directed this sort of domestic drama a few years ago, who'd he cast as his dad? He cast Lance Henriksen. I didn't see the movie, so I don't know if that's inaccurate, but I just, a big honking movie star like Viggo Mortensen got the opportunity to direct. Who's the guy he wanted to play? The older guy in the movie. So
yeah, I've asked a few actors, and I'm surprised always by the response. Because I've said, when you're performing a new role, how do you approach it, given the roles you've already done? Like, do you realize you're taking that along with you to that role, and how does that affect your choice? And they're like, I don't know, like they get surprised, like they don't know what I'm talking about. I was like, oh, really? I was like if someone, like some actors are so known for like one thing, like one horror or just comedy. When you see that doing something slightly different, you kind of know you're playing with that. You're playing with that reputation that you have as an actor for all those movies and years with you.
Yeah, I think for a lot of actors, they just can't frame it that way because they would lose their minds. And then there's the kind of actor that's a franchise, like somebody like Dwayne Johnson probably thinks about that a lot, and thinks about how, when he's going to play an anti-hero like Black Adam, that probably was a lot of calculated moves because he's thinking about his fan base. And Arnold was like that too back in the day. Arnold was always thinking about, are my fans going to accept me as the bad guy again after I play the good guy for so long? Things like that. Jackie Chan has to think about that all the time. And Jet Li, who didn't play a bad guy until he was cast in an American movie, that kind of stuff. But I think for most actors, they kind of have to separate themselves from that, because you have to think of yourself as a character. You can't think of yourself as how the audience is being received. Like, I'm sure a lot of people can, but I would just think that if you're on set and you're thinking about how your acting choice is going to be received by the audience, at that point, it's like, that's less acting and more projecting. What are they going to like? I should hold my hand this way. No, this way. But I also have found that the more really successful actors that I talk to, they do kind of separate themselves from the business a little bit, and they create a little space around themselves. This is starting to sound like the old character actor name drop hour, but I got to meet Harry Dean Stanton and have a really nice conversation with him. He was 87, like it was towards the end of his life, but he was probably my favorite actor, like if I had to pick one. And just a guy that every time, like I just rewatched Cool Hand Luke recently, and I'd forgotten that he's almost in there's a Greek chorus, like playing his guitar and everything. And I said to Harry, I was like, your favorite movies of yours are my favorite movies of yours. Paris, Texas, and Repo Man, and then Alien, of course. Alien is like, that's one of the greatest movies ever made. But my personal favorite, like Paris, Texas, is a movie that I watch probably every year and just am completely emotionally affected by. And Repo Man is that's just the best. Fucking Repo Man, man. So those are two of my favorite films. And I said that to him, like, was it important to you to be in great movies? And he kind of looked off in the distance and he said, oh, no, you can't control it. You can't control it. And he went on this little, like, he was just looking off the distance going like, no, you can't control it. You just do what you can. And you go this way because the wind blows you that way. You go this way, the wind blows you that way. You can't control any of it because it's all nothing. It's all nothing. And then you die and you're nothing.
Jesus Christ.
And then he turned to me from that line and smiled that Harry Dean Stanton smile with the twinkling eyes. And I was like, I have this moment. I will always have this moment. And I said, I'm really happy I met you, man. And clapped me on the back like an old Kentucky guy.
It is nice when someone that you're a fan of proves as fun or interesting as you hope they would be. Yeah. That's a hell of a thing. Like I'm just at that point of doing my interviews where I'm getting some people who I've always wanted to talk to, and I finally get to them. And when they live up to your expectations, that's a hell of a thing right there.
That's literally every interview in the Galaxy Quest documentary. Was every single person like met and exceeded my expectations. And even the ones that I was kind of worried about, like we had been told by a few people, oh, Tim Allen's going to be really obnoxious. And then he could not have been more gracious and generous and wonderful. And he talked to us for a really long time in a really thoughtful way and was really welcoming to us and everything. And I think that's a testament to how much he loves the movie. But the one that I was the most nervous about, I don't think anybody would fault me for this, but Sigourney Weaver, if that interview had gone poorly, I would have had to have like gone home and stared at my shelf of Blu-rays and just cried myself to sleep. Like, I'll never be able to watch my favorite movies again without thinking I fucked up. She could not have been cooler, nicer, and more normal. She was just a nice lady, and she was so nice to us. And you look at that, and you look at, and Tony Shalhoub was like that. Chill Mitchell was like the funniest interview. Chill Mitchell and Missy Pyle were the two funniest interviews, but Chill was like that. But like he was our buddy from the second we started talking to him. He was like, acting like we were all old friends and just telling jokes and all that kind of stuff. And Tony Shalhoub was like that. And then Sam Rockwell, when I met with Sam Rockwell, it was on the steps of the hotel. We were going to interview him inside, and he walked up the steps, and he didn't know what I looked like. So, and this is in New York, this is in the Village somewhere. And I said, "Hey, Sam." And he turned and said, "Hey, buddy, what's up?" And stepped up to talk to me. And I said, "I'm the guy you're meeting." He went, "Oh, great." Like, surprise. And it's like, yeah, that's a cool guy. What a great guy. And again, one of the greatest actors. He's so fantastic. So.
You have interviewed so many of the bucket list people in my realm of who I want to talk to. I'm just like, yeah. So if I ever just look like I'm just envious of you, it's because it's true.
Well, I mean, I'm so envious of. I look at the interviews that you've had, and it's like I look at those. The fact is that we're blessed. We're on some level, it's a little parasitic that I made a documentary about Galaxy Quest. Like, it is me in a way attaching myself to my favorite movie, or that is one of my favorite movies. I keep saying that. These are all my favorite movies are like 300 movies deep. Like there's so many movies that I couldn't live without. People said, "Give me your top 10." I'd be like, top 300 maybe. And Galaxy Quest is one of the great comedies, and it's one of the great sci-fi comedies, and it's one of the great unexpected movies. That's one of those movies I went to see randomly just to, and I've talked about this before, but it's like I was just trying to get out of my family's house around the holidays. So my high school buddy and I, because I was in college by that point, and we were just like, "Want to go see this? It looks funny, it has Alan Rickman and Sigourney Weaver in it, so it's probably good." And we went to see it, and then afterwards we're like, "Wow, was it my imagination or was that really good?" And so that almost became an obsession, because I was working in a video store in the college town that I lived in. And that following summer, it came out on DVD, and nobody had heard of this movie, or maybe they saw the trailer and said, "Oh yeah, I think I remember that." I ended up renting this movie as my free rental from the video store, like every night of the week for months. For like a summer, my roommates would text me, or my girlfriend would text me and say, "Can you bring home Galaxy Quest?" We watched that thing over and over and over again. And that sort of level of obsessive appreciation led to, 20 years later, me being one of the train cars. Like I'm mentioned in the Galaxy Quest book that Matt McAllister wrote. I'm mentioned in like the very last paragraph of the very last chapter, and that's great.
Yes,
couldn't ask for more than that. That's so great. My name's in the Galaxy Quest book. So on some level, it is that thing of just like, yeah, I'm the tick on the body of Galaxy Quest, but also it comes out of a genuine place of, yeah, but I love that movie and I wanted to understand the mystery behind that movie. So of course I'm going to attach myself to a movie like that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like sometimes, like I say, I love interviewing, so I enjoy it. But it does feel a bit like star fucking, just a little bit, what I'm saying, which I've never been a fan of. But at the same time, there's something about being able to watch something on TV or a movie and go, I want to talk to those people. I want to know what they know, thought about behind the scenes. And it does add something more. It's good for my audience, but I think it adds something to just the experience of watching it again, knowing, I know so and so. I remember asking about this and this, it does add a little extra thing to it.
And then in the case of that movie, and also you had my buddy Andre Gower on, talking about his Monster Squad documentary, and of course the experience of being in Monster Squad. And it's like those are two movies, Galaxy Quest and Monster Squad, that are beloved, and then don't have like a big. There's not a big special edition that goes into all of the secrets. Like there's a bunch of little interviews with everybody. They're kind of chopped up, but it's not treated the same way when you get a Criterion Collection, 4K Blu-ray that has whole documentaries and essays and all. It's not a movie that's covered in that same way. So in a weird way, then you become the person bringing the service to other fans of that thing. I think what I'm getting at is it all comes down to motivation. Like if you're connecting yourself to this stuff because you're just trying to further your career, or you are trying to be a star fucker and you're trying to be like, hey, look at who I know, then obviously that's a deeply insecure place to start from. And a lot of people have done very well having that be their approach. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I don't want to be like that. And it's not me hitching my wagon because I want for people to say, look at the glory of me, that I'm the biggest fan of this movie. It's literally me saying, this is a movie that I have always wondered about, and I will get to the bottom of it. My passion for it will carry me, just like in an interview that you have on this podcast, that you'll be bringing the depth of your appreciation, and then that's like a big net of goodwill that you kind of cast out, and then people go like, oh wow, and they start to make connections. When I talked to Sigourney Weaver, I was talking to her in between setups, because it was just, we would break occasionally and then my guys would adjust, stuff like that. I had an amazing camera crew on that thing. Those are my guys who've been working with me for years and years, and they're my good buddies. But while we were doing a setup, I started talking to her about Working Girl. And I think she got an Oscar nomination for that. I think I'm remembering that correctly, that she got a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination. And it's a Mike Nichols movie. Mike Nichols directed it. And there's a moment in Working Girl where it's a scene with her and Harrison Ford, the first scene the two of them are in together in the movie. And she's playing this, almost stereotypical career woman throughout the movie. And then she has a scene with Harrison Ford, and I'm talking to her about it. I'm like, and you're so girlish. Like she's adjusting the pillows on the bed and adjusting her, one strap down and the direction of her hair and stuff, because she wants to impress Harrison Ford, which, whether you're male, female, gay, or straight, you want to impress Harrison Ford. Like I'd be like that too. I'd be like, maybe the chair should be here. I don't know. So I'm talking to her about all these little moments when she is so focused on him, and there's a moment when he says something that disappoints her, and she gets this look on her face, and I'm like going into great detail about this performance, and then I realize, oh my god, I'm crazy fanning so much on Sigourney Weaver right now, and she's looking at me and smiling, and I say, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to be that guy. And this is what Sigourney said. She goes, oh, listen, no, we love knowing that somebody's watching that closely. It's like, right, they put all that work into their performance. Why would they be upset to be like, I really loved your performance and I watched it, every minute detail, all that sort of stuff. It's like, on some level, that's like, great, thank you. You noticed the thing I was putting into my work.
Well, I mean, that's a sign of a damn good interview. Someone who is paying attention, because I think guests can tell the difference between someone who wrote down some questions and someone who actually paid attention to what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And when you're watching, for some of the listeners who may not have caught on right now, you're the director and executive producer of a documentary called Never Surrender, a Galaxy Quest documentary, which was absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much for doing that. So,
thank you.
I mean, obviously when you watch those interviews, you can tell you're someone who cares, right? And because, I mean, the interview question, I mean, once again, they're obviously about the movie, but you feel like there's a little bit more going on. You dug a little bit deeper into the questions, you got a little deeper into what they actually were doing. So how long did it take you to prepare for those interviews? And also, not only that though, but how much did you have to leave on the cutting room floor that you wish to God made it to the movie, into the film?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. So much. and there's a director's cut that's 2 hours long. That, to me, that's the definitive version of that story, because it's very much, I feel like the version that came out is very focused on commentary, and there's a lot of, this is why you should think Galaxy Quest is a great movie. And I was more about hearing from the people that made the movie tell me what it was like making that movie, which then led to, and now I can ascertain from that why it's so great. You know, the evidence is in the sort of the anecdotes that we got. They weren't just anecdotes, they were almost like a little microcosm of how any film is made, and how any movie is the sum total of the effort put into it and the choices that were made, and then the stuff they had no control over. And so to me, that's like a big part of it. And there's a lot of stuff that's not in the version that got released that I do feel like is essential, like stuff about the pig lizard and stuff about Saris, you know, and the makeup. Robin Sachs, the actor who's passed away who played Saris, his makeup apparatus was a thing that Stan Winston had developed for his version of Planet of the Apes. That would have been the version that James Cameron produced. I don't think he was ever going to direct it, but it would have been the Lightstorm version of Planet of the Apes before the one we got that Tim Burton directed. So there was like an apparatus in place that would have been how they did the lip flap on the apes and stuff like that. So yeah, even though that's a geeky deep dive, and you could make the argument of it's Galaxy Quest, it's not Star Wars. It's like, yeah, but all of those choices that were made, that happens on every movie. Like the fact that it could have been a movie directed by Harold Ramis starring Kevin Kline or Alec Baldwin, and that could be the movie that we got. But because Tim Allen and then Harold Ramis leaves, and then it's Dean directing it, Dean Pariseau, and you know, Dean Pariseau was friends with the guys who made Bill and Ted, but I don't think, if Galaxy Quest hadn't been a movie he had directed, I don't think he would have gotten the gig directing Bill and Ted Face the Music. If Tim Allen had been cast in the lead in Galaxy Quest, he wouldn't have had that personal trainer who then he later married and became his second wife, because he had gone through a divorce that I know was very, you know, very involved and painful for him. And I think he was in kind of a dark time when he got cast in Galaxy Quest. Then he got cast in Galaxy Quest and met the woman that he's been married to ever since.
Very cool.
Like there's something to that. There's something to that magic of here's what we intended and here's the unintended consequence.
Yeah.
And my master theory, I guess, my master thesis rather, is that the stuff that they fought for at the time, the stuff that, you know, people like Deborah Zane and Elizabeth Cantillon and Bob Gordon, the writer, and everybody in the cast, like all of these people bringing, you know, Debbie Zane, the casting director, it's like, look at the cast of that movie, and she is a hero, and she, you know, to that movie, she fought for the right people, and then they got cast, and that's the movie we love. It's the result of all those things. And then the movie came out and it didn't do as well as anybody hoped, and it was kind of a bomb, but not really, because it made its money back. And then here we are, you know, decades later, and all of the stuff that they fought for, like having the aliens be octopi based and not having them be gray man, you know, like Close Encounters, all the stuff that they fought for is the stuff that we latched onto as fans that made this our favorite movie. I think that every movie is like that. Every movie is the sum total of all of the stuff that was happening while the movie was getting made. And then what lasts is the stuff that people really passionately fought for as, no, this is the right move to make. This is the inspired choice. And like, I'm wearing a Buckaroo Banzai t-shirt, right? And I know that some battles must have been lost there, but you watch that movie, it's such a singular film. And had it been any of the different versions it could have been, if other people had their way, I don't think I would be wearing this t-shirt. I don't think I would have worked on the Shout Factory Blu-ray, much less own it, you know? So, but anyway, the whole point is that all those interviews that I conducted, all the work that I put into it, did come from starting from a place of, I'm very interested in learning about this. And then every interview sort of was more information that led to then the next interview. So I interviewed Dean Pariseau and Bob Gordon first. Dean by himself, then Bob showed up and I interviewed them together, and then Dean left and I finished up with Bob by himself. And so that was like the first day. And so those two guys together and separately gave me a lot of like, oh, you should talk to this person, talk to that person. The first person to say yes was Tim Allen, but then we couldn't schedule him for like 8 months. So I got the yes from Tim Allen, and that got me the green light to make the documentary. But by having Dean be the first interview and then Bob, be the practically the same first interview, that gave me the sort of starting point, and then it just, your knowledge grows and grows and grows. It is like researching for a book. It's you're uncovering all these things. Somebody says, oh, you should talk to Deborah Zane. We talked to Deborah Zane. She really enjoys herself. We get along. It's a great interview. And then she says, is there anybody you're having trouble getting? And we say, well, Rainn Wilson. And she says, I'll get you Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson he's never talked about being in Galaxy Quest anywhere else that I can see, not for any reason other than I think no one's asked him. Because then he showed up and we had this great interview where he talked with such affection about that movie. And then also it's Rainn Wilson. So why wouldn't you want to talk to him? Yeah, he was a great one. So anyway, so the preparation was just remembering what I remembered of, there was a release that said Harold Ramis is directing this DreamWorks comedy, sci-fi comedy. It's in the early days of DreamWorks. It was maybe their third or fourth movie that they announced. And then remembering that Harold Ramis was going to direct it and then dropped out, and when Tim Allen was cast, and then everybody kind of wrote off the movie, and then I saw it and it was fantastic. So it's like starting from there and starting from the knowledge I had of watching the movie over and over again and being able to quote it and having that knowledge base, and then with every interview that knowledge base would just grow and grow and grow. So by the time I interview Sigourney Weaver, I know what questions I want to ask her based on what other people said, and then I walk away from that interview knowing what I want to ask Jill Mitchell about working with Sigourney Weaver, knowing what I want to ask Sam Rockwell, knowing I want all that sort of stuff. So
say some of the people who you would have otherwise interviewed, like Harold Ramis and Alan Rickman, you couldn't because they had passed away by that point.
Alan Rickman passing away was part of the inspiration for doing it in the first place.
So when you're thinking about something like Harold Ramis, who, as his story is that it didn't work out, it failed, whatever, what decision went about that to talk about it, knowing that Harold Ramis wouldn't be able to comment on his part of it?
You go one of two ways. You try to find an archive thing where he does comment on it. But what we ended up doing was we just asked Mark Johnson, did you ever talk to Harold about it? And Mark said, to an audience full of people, by the way, at a Galaxy Quest screening that we held, basically to have there be an ending to our documentary. There was a moment where we asked him on stage and he said, I talked to Harold about it. He said, worst mistake I ever made in my life, or biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Big. But then there's another weird thing, which is at one point, Dean was attached to direct The Ice Harvest, which Harold then took over. So in a weird way, they switched movies. And if you look at Dean's career, something like The Ice Harvest was closer to his sensibilities. And then Harold Ramis, just from the Ghostbusters aspect, if you think sci-fi comedy, even though Ghostbusters is supernatural horror, if you think that kind of comedy, it's like Harold Ramis is an obvious choice. It's that weird thing of like everything wound up in the right place. And I don't think Harold was unhappy that he didn't direct Galaxy Quest. I think he was perfectly fine with the life and career that he had.
No, I'm sure.
But that's the thing that time gives you. Hey, buddy. That's the thing that time gives you, which is you can then look back and say, everything turned out okay. That's all right that I didn't make that movie. So
now, when you're thinking when you started filming approaching filming your documentary, did by any point what you thought the movie was going to be, the film was going to be, change to what it actually was? How much were you almost a captive of where the interviewees were taking you?
Right. I always kind of knew it was going to be a process of discovery. And there were interviews that I never got around to getting, specifically with the cinematographer. And he wanted to do it, and it was just, I think he lives in Europe, and it kept getting scheduled and taken off the schedule and blah, 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 blah. And then I would have loved to have, I actually had an interview scheduled with LeVar Burton, and he's been directing, and it's like I wanted to talk to him not just about Star Trek, but also talk to him about Daryl Chill Mitchell, because who he had directed. And Daryl mentions in his interview, Chill says, I got to talk to LeVar Burton. And then that's like, oh, we should talk to LeVar Burton. So it's things like that, which is part of the discovery. But the other part of the discovery is this. I had always heard the story was Harold Ramis is in the production office, and Tim Allen and Jeffrey Katzenberg walk up to him. And Jeffrey Katzenberg says, Harold, this is Tim. And Tim sticks out his hand and says, I'm very excited to work with you. And Harold says, on what? And then when Jeff tells him we've cast him in Galaxy Quest, a screaming match happens right there in the hallway.
Oh, now, shit.
But that's the story I always heard. It's not true. I discovered that it's not true from making the documentary.
Gotcha.
And the version that is true is what Tim Allen told us, which was they sat down at a breakfast and it got a little uncomfortable. It got a little awkward.
Yeah.
Which of course that's what happened. That makes so much more sense. These guys are all rich movers and shakers in Hollywood. They're not going to get into a screaming match. They're going to be like, and it's going to be awkward. But then also, I don't know. I wasn't there. So for all I know, 5 minutes later, there was a scream match in the hallway. But I choose to believe what I discovered and what Tim told us, not least of all because I think Tim was being very big to sort of come out and say, I don't think that guy wanted to work with me. And Tim is validated by the movie because it's the best performance he's ever given. He's fantastic in it. Like, it's not just, look at how good Tim Allen is. What a surprise. It's literally, he's great in that movie. No one else would have been as good as him. And it's the perfect casting. And it's that thing that Paul Scheer says in the doc about if you squint at him, he even looks a little bit like Shatner from that era, the kind of the head and the hair, everything. But that process of discovery, this to me, it's a pop culture documentary. It's about taking the subject and diving deep and going for all the nerdy details and finding out what it is and finding the secret, digging for it rather than starting with an agenda, starting with if you're making like a message documentary, or if you're going to make a documentary, if you're going to make The Thin Blue Line, like obviously Errol Morris doesn't know that he's going to get this guy on tape confessing that he actually committed the murder when he started making that documentary. But the documentary starts with the premise of, I'm going to expose, the criminal justice system and the slippery slope of random events that can lead to a person being falsely imprisoned. So he starts with that. I started with, I'm going to make a movie about them making and see what I find out. So, and it's just a pop culture documentary. Like on some level, it really is just, it is for fun and it is for the fans.
Well, speaking of the fans, one of my favorite aspects of the film is the inclusion of the family of cosplayers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So how did they end up on your radar?
That was Harold and Roxanne. And so what happened was I did about a year's worth of interviews. And then we were in post and looking at it. And there was this quality of like, well, we don't want this to just be a talking head documentary. And a producer had been brought in, and it's this producer who really did like produce the documentary. Like she really deserves the lion's share of the credit for that. She came in, like she is somebody who really cared about the documentary and cared about the quality of the documentary. And she and I didn't always see eye to eye. In fact, we butted heads a lot. But there was a clear from her, like she wanted this to be a great documentary. And she and I talked, and she said, I really want to go to San Diego Comic-Con and I want to interview like cosplayers and talk to them about Galaxy Quest. And I said, I've been saying from the beginning that I want to do that. She's like, oh, let me make that happen for us. And then she comes back and she's like, okay, we're going to go to Silicon Valley Comic-Con. So we go to San Jose instead of San Diego. And this is just like the making of Galaxy Quest. This is just like the movie where the thing we tried to do and couldn't do led to the thing we did that led to this moment I'm about to describe. So she says, I just wish there were Galaxy Quest cosplayers here. I wish that there were Galaxy Quest cosplayers. One of the things I wanted to do in the documentary that's in the director's cut is I really wanted to show that the movie's kind of an underdog. So we have some Marvel cosplayers, a girl dressed as Mystique and a guy dressed as Spider-Man, who are like, what's that? You know, that peppered in there with all the Galaxy Quest fans are people who are like, oh, right, the movie with Tim Allen, right? And so what ends up happening is she says, I wish there were Galaxy Quest cosplayers. And I'm like, I wish there were Galaxy Quest cosplayers too. Part of the reason we're making this documentary is because there aren't. You know, like we know how cool this movie is, but no one else does. I mean, come on, this is a dark horse of a movie. Like, I'm basically saying it's not going to happen. She, the whole time I'm getting B-roll, is checking Instagram, and she's checking hashtags like Galaxy Quest and Silicon Valley and San Jose hashtags. And I turn around and she goes, there are Thermians here. Like that, just like that. She goes, there are Thermians here. I'm like, here? And she's like, today. They're posting pictures today. And then at that moment, it's like, fan out. We're finding the Thermians. So like she went one way, I went the other way. And I told my camera guys, I'm like, stay here. And they're like, well, fine. You know, these guys, like I said, they've been working for me for years. They worked on my shows with Scotty and that we did, the special effects shows. And they were used to me saying things like, okay, something's happening, go shoot it. And they're like, oh, fine, we'll go. Yeah, all right. I can't believe we're still working with this guy. So anyway, so I tell my camera guys, stay here. I'm going to find these Thermians and bring them to you. And they're like, fine. So she goes downstairs, I go upstairs. And then I'm just like RoboCop with my little, you know, targeting thing. Just you go like this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go down this aisle. I'm going to turn and go down this aisle. I'm just keeping my eyes peeled, just looking for the Thermians, looking for the Thermians, looking for the Thermians. And then finally, there they are. I turn a corner and there are two Thermians in character. And they're just talking to somebody. And it's a man and a woman. And I walk up to them and I say, I'm so happy I found you. And they turn around like, they did a really good job. I'm trying to approximate the job that they did. Just the smiles, the blind smile. You know, and I say, I'm making a documentary about Galaxy Quest and I want to interview you. And they look at each other and they're not breaking character. And finally, one of them says, historical documents? I'm like, yes, historical documents. I'm making a historical document. I'm making a historical document. They're like, oh, historical documents. It's like, yes, will you follow me? And they're like, and they would not break character. They would not break character. It was crazy. So I'm like, okay, stand here and count to 30. And then when you get to 30, walk through these doors. And they're like, just doing their. And then I go and I run up to my camera guys. I'm like, okay, through those doors in like 5 seconds, two Thermians going to walk in. Get it. And I think it's Dan Cavanaugh, my cameraman. Justin Cruz was a DP and camera operator. Dan was a camera operator and basically like a co-DP. They worked together so well. It's Dan's shot of, you basically see a bunch of people at a Comic-Con and then crash zoom in and there they are. Two Thermians walking through the crowd. And we discover them in the shot the way we discovered them in real life. And they walked up to our camera and I interviewed them and they didn't break character once.
Holy crap.
They were just a pair of Thermians. So finally at the end, someone takes pity on me and hands me a card. And I look and the card says Thermians from Utah. They're the Thermians from Utah. So then after we part ways, like we get back to the hotel and I call them and a guy answers the phone and says, hi, hey, Jack, I was the one talking to you this afternoon. I'm sorry, I had to be out of costume to talk to you. And I'm just like, what? Oh my God. They're that committed. They would not break character the whole time they were in costume because it's for them. It's about giving other fans the experience of meeting Thermians at a convention, just like the people do so you have to be like, oh, you guys are cosplayers. And they're like, and pretending they don't know what that means. So you can feel like you're a character in Galaxy Quest meeting a Thermian at QuestCon. And then after that, we set up the interview for the next day. We went up into the hotel and we had an actual interview with them. And they're just a lovely couple named Harold and Roxanne Weir. And they live in Utah. And Utah is where they shot a big portion of Galaxy Quest. So that then became the end of our movie was let's have a screening of Galaxy Quest. Let's invite people who made it and were in it. And let's also bring in the Thermians from Utah to meet their heroes. And that's the end of the movie. He's my hero, you know? So
Like I said, it was such a great part. And those, I mean, they seem so genuine and they're so likable. How, I mean, do you stop and think to yourself, how lucky were you that the two Thermians you found weren't like crazy jackasses?
I mean, for sure, but also if that's your favorite movie, then you're probably a sweet person to begin with.
Mm.
And so there's something about that movie. And also everybody who worked on the movie, there's a sort of fundamental decency that runs through everybody. So even the sort of craziest people on that cast and crew, there's the reason why the movie has this sort of sweetness to it, I think, is because all those people are just at the end of the day kind of kind-hearted people.
Mm.
And then everybody's got an edge too because they're also smart. So the movie has that intelligent edge. It's a bit smartass. It's very much Dean's personality. Dean is a great guy, and he's a humanist with a big heart, and he's a total smartass. You know, he's like a cynic too. He's a bit cynical. He's like a cynical humanist. And when I told Dean and Bob how many times I'd seen Galaxy Quest, they're in a two-shot, and you see Bob's smile get bigger and bigger, and Dean get more and more scared. He's like, listen, I'm sorry, you know. But so the luck, there is the luck. We're nothing but lucky. Like it really is just good fortune. But then it's also that producer I mentioned, Caitlin, it's also her saying, I want to make this happen, and her working hard to make it happen. You know, so it's that too. It's gosh, it's just like the making of Galaxy Quest. It's the cross section between what you intended and what you never intended. So
And
yeah,
and just going back to the Thermians for just a moment.
please, they're the heart of the movie.
I was gonna say, like, how did your experience with them kind of unlock a little bit more of the meaning behind what you were going to do with your documentary? Like, because obviously they're kind of the heart, you know, I said the heart, but they're also, you know, you're the surrogates for the fan. You know, this is what it's like to be a lover of Galaxy Quest from people who truly do love it to the umpteenth degree. So how did that experience kind of alter or expand how you were going to view what you were doing?
Well, what they really gave us was the voice of the fans, and they gave us the bookends of the movie. So the movie begins with these two people and nobody else is dressed like Galaxy Quest characters, but then people see them and smile and say, I remember that movie, and hug them, want pictures with them, stuff like that. But they're alone. And then cut to the end of the movie, and there's a crowd of people who are just there for Galaxy Quest. And that's kind of what digging into that movie is like, into Galaxy Quest, I mean, where that's like so many people's favorite movie, and Hollywood and the film industry doesn't know that. But the people who really love it, they know that. Mark Johnson certainly knows that. He's been trying to get a version of that movie, a follow-up made this whole time. And every time there's like hey, remember, everybody loves Galaxy Quest, and now it's in development again for Paramount Plus. So as a series, as a follow-up series. So it's that what's that movie? It's you say shark, you got a panic in our hands. Sorry. You start out saying Galaxy Quest, and people are still like, oh yeah, the one with Tim Allen. And then there are a few people like, oh, I love that movie. And then by the end, it's like, see how many people love this movie? We sold out in what, 2 minutes, selling tickets to a screening of the movie that everybody's already seen a ton of times.
Right.
Most of the people in the audience probably own a copy, but they want to show up to be part of that crowd and say, look, we love this movie. So
now one thing that you brought up as well, and we mentioned a little bit, is obviously Alan Rickman, who's such a big presence in that movie. Partly just the dryness of his character, and it's just how, I mean, it's a great character. There's, as you mentioned in the film, is that when people are talking about bringing back Galaxy Quest, the question is, what the hell do you do about Alan Rickman's character? As someone who kind of steeped now into all those characters and went into some of the details of what would have come up next,
Yeah.
How do you think they were going to answer that question?
Well, no, I can't say anything, but I do know how they were going to, and I'm sure it's changed since then. When he was still alive and the Galaxy Quest reunion was going to include him, that's the version that's like, oh, why didn't that happen? Like that's the calamity of obviously losing him, because only after he passed away did we learn that he really was just the best guy and just the best possible combination of acerbic wit and genuine human kindness that you could ask for. And it's like, God, why did that discovery have to be made after we had lost him? Because we already knew what a brilliant actor he was. Uniquely brilliant. Like, I don't really go back and watch the Harry Potter movies, but I do watch that supercut of all the Snape scenes in order. And by the end, it's like, and that doesn't happen without Alan Rickman. There was like, not only was he so funny and so unique, just that voice and that delivery and that that it's short. I can't even do it, because you need a resonator, you need the big nose, and then the weird. Anyway, yeah, what a guy. And then in addition to that, it was like narratively, that's like Spock and Kirk. So how do you make a Kirk without Spock? I guess it's generations, but even then, like, the loss of Spock is sort of hanging over that movie. The removal of Spock from the dynamics is hanging over that entire movie. Because, yeah, of course it's great to see Kirk one last time, but you want to see Kirk and Spock one last time, So I don't know. Like, whatever they do, I'll be interested in. But I always feel this. I feel this way about remakes, and I feel this way about sequels. And it took me a long time to feel this way. So I had to work on myself to feel this way. It doesn't erase the thing that came before it. Sure, it's a disappointment or a missed opportunity if it doesn't turn out well. But just because they remade a movie doesn't mean that the original disappears. Like, obviously, if they make like a new version of the movie and you're like, wait, they cut out that part, that was the best part. Obviously that's different when they special edition the original and then make the original unavailable. But I'm talking about if they make a sequel series to Galaxy Quest, of course I'm going to watch it. I'm going to want to see what happens. But I kind of have to put my expectations away and just see what they do. I do hope that if they do it, Dean and Bob are part of it. And I don't just mean in the credits. I mean part of the creative decisions of it, because I do see them as the two-headed monster that really, like, Elizabeth Cantillon is a hero to that movie, and she really protected that movie and really produced that movie. And Debbie Zane, of course, and all throughout the movie. Don Zimmerman, the editor, all of these people really contributed hugely to the tone of this movie and to the success of this movie. And it's like, yeah, but at the top of that is this two-headed monster of Bob's writing and Dean's directing. And I kind of feel like they're the Kirk and Spock of Galaxy Quest for me. So if somebody else does it, if it was the Paul Scheer version or the Simon Pegg version or whoever it ends up being, I'm going to be interested. And if it's no good, it doesn't matter. I can go back and watch the original movie.
Well, I mean, I think like one of the things about Galaxy Quest, the whole idea was, at least in my opinion, as just a fan of the movie, is somewhere along the lines of just finding the value of what what the actors, they found the value of making a great television, great fandom, great sci-fi stuff, great nerd,
right.
and and find that it really, on some level, even though it's all fake, it's still extremely important and in a very real way. And they had that realization in the movie. They put the aliens, the Thermians, kind of once again, the whole society is built around, this is all real. And they had that discovery of the actors. I wonder what can be done after to grow upon that, because they've already had that enlightenment.
Yeah, and also you get at something really, really important, which is it's not just that it's a showbiz parable, it's that there's something about human nature that's baked into that. And everybody always talks about that. The thing that makes Galaxy Quest so special is that it validates fandom. And it validates positive fandom rather than toxic fandom. It validates not holding what you love tight, but it validates being passionate about what you love and appreciating the people that either made it or the people that appreciate it. So, and it's also, it's like, you know, people in showbiz don't need any more validation, honestly, when you get right down to it, even though we crave it.
Right.
And I said we just then to lump myself in there too. I am barely in show business. I am sitting on the curb of show business while it happens behind me. But there is something that needs to be updated to what the role is of pop culture today, that then becomes a universal truth to make it as good as Galaxy Quest. Because Galaxy Quest is about the sort of the definition of being a hero is about helping the other person and you know thinking about the other person and working with the other person instead of just thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to be something, aspiring to be something that's ultimately hollow, it's only about the people you're with and the people you love and the people who love you. Like that's really what it's all about. So what do we do with that in today's just fan culture? Like let's take out, you know, social political implications and just talk about fan culture. What is the role of media today to fans? It's kind of, that's a hard question to ask. And I don't know if there is a human truth that they can, if they figured it out, that would be brilliant. That would be the masterpiece. That would be the follow-up to Galaxy Quest. But that's a hard challenge, I gotta say.
And I said one thing I did love about the movie Galaxy Quest, and obviously your documentary lands on, is it starts off deceptively cynical.
Yeah.
You know, it has that thing where you're just like, because it kind of, you're watching a little bit, and it's almost a little bit like, I mean, some people might disagree, but I love the Big Bang Theory. And at a little bit at the beginning, you're thinking to yourself, are they making fun of me? You know, they're making fun of fans,
Right.
they're making fun of me. And then when you same thing with Galaxy Quest, you're like, are they making fun of us? They feel like they're making fun of. And then as you keep watching, you're like, oh, this you know, this not all. It's the love underneath all that, and they're recognizing that, and that's the point of it. Like, yeah, you know, you got to laugh at a little bit. You know, yeah, you're a fan, you're nerdy, you're obviously geeking out. It's a little unusual, but at the same time, they realize, but there's the heart underneath all that that's genuinely loving something, and that's the part that matters.
You know how you're the best. You make fun of your beloved family member better than anybody else does.
Right.
It's like that. You're the best one at making fun of your beloved family member. Somebody else does it. It's like, hey, you know, back off.
Right.
I'm the only one that gets to talk about my mom like that. Come on, back off. So there's a little bit of that though. There's that. It's not just pulling somebody's leg. It's also affectionately observing accurately why that's silly, why that's ironic, why that's funny, all that kind of stuff. But then in principle, there is that strong core of, but this is why it's important. And if we commit to that, there's something lovely about that, about being not cynical and saying, no. If this is that important to somebody, there has to be a reason that's not just easily dismissed.
Now, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, one reason I love doing my interviews is that I get a chance to watch something, then watch it again, knowing I had that conversation. That just adds that little extra, almost like I'm gonna say sweetener to watch it, because you get that little extra details, you get the little extra connection. Now, having
it's like having cliff notes in your head while you're watching, it's like having extra, and or not cliff notes, the
director's comment, the director's commentary in your head. You're just like, I remember that's what he was talking about. So having done this documentary film, you've done all these interviews, you were already a lover of the film itself, Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
How has the experience of talking to all these people changed the next time you watched it?
You know what's really funny is that when I watch it, I remember all the stories, but it doesn't take away how it works as a movie. And again, like I was saying before, if a movie's really good, it works on me. Like I really only get taken out of a movie thinking about the making of the movie if it's not working. So what's kind of great about it is what informs me is knowing how much love was there. Like Dean said, it's very rare for people who make a movie together to stay in touch the way that crew did. And I don't think it even was, oh, we're making something special, oh, we're making a classic. It's like, the people who made The Godfather have had to talk about it for, the rest of their lives because it's The Godfather. It was such an
Right, right.
extraordinary movie. Nobody was having fun making it. That was a hard movie to make. But then of course there was fun too, and those people feel like they're in the trenches together. When it comes to Galaxy Quest, I think regardless of how the movie came out, the experience of making it, like Sigourney Weaver said, she's like, you look around and you're like, look at these people, look at these incredibly talented people. And then she finished that thought by saying, you want to save the people from the studio. Don't you see who we have? Don't you see who's, don't you see who's a part of it? And don't you see what great work they're doing? All that kind of stuff. But I think that's what changes when I do watch it now. It's bittersweet to watch it now, because of the experience I had making the documentary, but also because, it is something that is now connected to my life for me. So I watch it and it is now so directly aligned with experiences that I had that I'm watching it thinking about those experiences. And so it actually kind of makes it harder to watch because of that. But when I remove myself from that and I'm just watching the movie, I can see that love. I can see that these people really cared about what they were doing and that they really cared about making just what they thought was the best movie, as opposed to just saying, yeah, whatever, it's a job. Punching the clock. This is what I want to do. No, I feel like even when you watch great comedy troupes or great bands, you learn the stories, you learn about the tension. You watch Get Back and you realize what was going on with the Beatles. You read books about Monty Python or the Kids in the Hall, and then you watch those sketch shows and you can see that there's a tension. When you watch when you watch a Monty Python sketch, knowing what the personal dynamics were, you start to see like, oh, isn't that interesting? There's a certain amount of tension. I think especially the Kids in the Hall, because those guys are like, they're all like siblings. And then my favorite Kids in the Hall sketches are always the Scott Thompson, Dave Foley ones, because I feel like those guys were the most different and there's a certain heat to when they collaborated. So like a sketch like Hazy Movie with Francesca Fiore and Bruno Ponce Jones, like that's one of my favorite sketches because I can kind of feel the head and the heart push and pull between Dave Foley and Scott Thompson. By the way, Kids in the Hall is not completely off the subject of Galaxy Quest because Kevin McDonald shows up at the end and says, give him a hand, he's British. Anyway, so I see that when I watch it. I see the love maybe in a way that even if I was looking for it, I would be projecting onto it. And now I'm like, no, I can see it. I can see what was there.
So what's next for you?
Well, I've been working on a bunch of stuff, but most immediately in October, in Screamfest, which is a big genre festival here in Los Angeles, a short film that I directed and produced with an actress named Fina Sanchez, who actually wrote the movie and stars in the movie. It's a short film called A Good Scream, and that is going to play at Screamfest. And then after, if you don't live in Los Angeles and you don't want to come out to the Chinese theater to watch our movie, you absolutely should. If you live in Los Angeles, come out to the Chinese theater, watch our movie. A Good Scream is going to be hosted on the Screamfest channel. No, but so A Good Scream, my short film, is gonna we did a special screening at the Chattanooga Film Festival, which is another great genre festival, but that was an online thing. We weren't actually there in person. This is a chance for us to actually go and see it in person. And Fina and I are incredibly proud of the movie. Like I said, she wrote it and she stars in it, and her performance is so fantastic. And it's a horror short in kind of an unexpected way. Like I don't think people see it coming. I think it doesn't follow the rules of your regular horror short. So I'm not saying it's skidamarink or anything. It's just hopefully it's an unexpected experience. So that's coming up right next. And then after that, I don't know, double strike. It's a weird time. We'll see what happens next. We'll see what happens with. I hope that there is a end to the strikes, and I hope that everybody's happy and we all get back to work. And I hope that's what's next. In the meantime, I'm watching a lot of movies. Staying connected to the fan who I was, who got me into this in the first place. That is an ongoing thing that I always try to make sure I do. And my partner and I, we watch. She and I are both giant genre fans, and love cinema in general. We just watched a bunch of Kurosawa movies, and did a deep dive on that. And we make it a point to, even though we are creators, you got to remember why you did this in the first place. You got to stay a fan. So even with all this bullshit that's going on, and people not, it being kind of a hard environment right now with people's interests feeling so far apart, here with the strike situation, it's like, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to watch that movie that was your favorite movie when you were 12 years old, and try to remember why you wanted to be a filmmaker in the first place. So
indeed. Well,
he said to himself. Thank you. And please call me Jack.